Imagine living life under a spotlight you never asked for, where every step is tracked by the cold eyes of people who see you as something less than human. For Koharu Kanba, school wasn't a place of learning. It was a stage where the only performance was her own social execution. Every time her eyes met theirs, she didn't see classmates. She saw a wall of pure, unadulterated scorn. That feeling didn't just fade away after graduation, it curdled into a 20-year curse. April 2027 finds Koharu at 35, buried under a mountain of trash and resentment, her only window to the world being the glow of a smartphone. It's a life measured in zero-calorie sodas and the rot of a 2-decade-long retreat from reality. The only time her heart still beats is in the glow of a live-stream chat. When the VTuber on the screen actually reads her name, the rush is better than any drug, a moment of being seen without being judged. Koharu is practically vibrating, clutching her phone like a lifeline as she shouts, "She even read my name!" But the door creaks open, and the fantasy of the internet dies. Her mother, Haru, enters with a tray of food, her movements slow and heavy. Koharu looks up, and the sight of her mother's face hits like a physical blow. The lines are deeper, and her hair is almost entirely white. The realization is a cold shower. Her mother has spent her life serving a ghost. Usually, Koharu waits for the door to click shut before she even touches the food. A ghost in her own house. But today the silence is too loud. She stares at the door, thinking about how her mother didn't always look this tired, her mind looping on a single agonizing question. Has her hair always been that white? Her eyes fixate on the tray of food and she realizes time is running out for both of them. Even at 30, she's still a child waiting for a tomorrow that never comes. The panic sets in, sharp and jagged, as she tells herself there's still time for her, there has to be. She needs a connection, something real, or she's going to drown in this room. So she does the one thing she's always been too terrified to try. She reaches out. She finds a post from Naota, someone into the same anime, someone who sounds just as lonely as she feels. She types the words with shaking fingers, a Hail Mary into the digital void. "I've wanted some more friends if you guys don't mind." The response is instant. A plan is made. Suddenly, the 35-year-old shut-in is standing in the hallway, dressed to leave for the first time in years. Her parents watch her go with a mixture of hope and terror, their hands gripping the morning newspaper as Koharu promises them she'll look for work too. She's finally moving, but the air outside feels like lead. Standing on a street corner in the city, the world is too bright and too loud. She scans the crowd, looking for the knit cap mentioned in the messages. Then she sees him, a boy who looks just as out of place as she feels. This is it. The moment she proves to herself that she isn't a curse. She approaches him, her voice cracking, barely able to squeeze out a greeting. She identifies herself, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. But Naota doesn't smile. He doesn't say he's glad to meet her. He just regards her with a blank, chilling indifference that feels all too familiar. The mask slips, and the internet friend is gone. In his place is just another boy with a cruel mouth. He glares at her like she's something he found on the bottom of his shoe, his voice dripping with disgust. As he turns to walk away, the words echo through her skull. "I can't be friends with these damn creeps." And just like that, Koharu is back in the spotlight, alone. She runs. She runs until her lungs burn, and the world is just a blur of tears and mocking faces. The bridge is under construction, a skeleton of steel over the dark water. Koharu doesn't think, she just lets go. As she falls, the world goes silent, and her last thought is a jagged realization of the end. This is how my story ends. In the space between life and the water, she sees them, her parents, holding her as a baby, full of a hope she eventually strangled. She wanted to change. She wanted to be the daughter they deserved, not the outcast the rest of the world left behind. "I'm sorry," she whispers to the void. "I didn't change at all." But instead of cold water, there's sunlight, and a voice, loud, bossy, and impossibly alive. Koharu sits up, her heart racing as she inspects her own hands. They aren't the hands of a 35-year-old woman. They're soft, small, and unscarred. She's in a bed in a room that smells like home, and her brain is screaming, "I'm not in a hospital." She stumbles to the mirror, her breath hitching in her throat. The reflection staring back isn't the hollow-eyed shut-in she's known for decades. It's her 15 years old, with long, messy hair and a face full of a future that hasn't been ruined yet. The word dead hangs in the air, but the girl in the glass looks terrifyingly alive. The door slams open, and there she is. Haru, 20 years younger, full of energy and exasperation. She doesn't have the white hair or the tired eyes. She's shouting about pajamas and school ceremonies, throwing a uniform at Koharu like today is just another Tuesday. Get ready. Starting today, you're a high school student. On the train, the world feels like a fever dream. The flip phones, the uniforms, the date on the screen, April 2007. It's real. She's been thrown back to the very start of her downfall. She's hyperventilating, staring at her reflection in the train window as she realizes she hasn't just changed, she's returned to the past. Then a voice cuts through the static of her panic. "Coco, how long has it been?" She looks up and her heart nearly stops. Standing there is a boy with spiky orange hair and a smile that could light up the entire car. It's Izumi Minamizu, the boy who used to be the chubby target of every joke, now transformed into someone she barely recognizes. She's staring like he's a ghost, and Izumi just laughs, explaining how he lost all that weight. He remembers her, the quiet girl from elementary school, with a warmth that makes Koharu want to cry. When he realizes they're going to the same high school, his face lights up with pure, honest joy. What luck, he beams, oblivious to the fact that he's currently talking to a 35-year-old soul in a teenager's body. The tears start before she can stop them, and poor Izumi panics, thinking he's said something wrong. He fumbles for a handkerchief, looking at her with genuine concern. Koharu is paralyzed. No one has spoken to her this kindly in decades, especially not someone who isn't family. "You're a very kind person, did you know that?" she thinks as her chest tightens with a feeling she thought was dead. At the school gates, the reality of the situation starts to sink in. This isn't just a dream or a coma, it's a second chance. When they check the class lists, Izumi lets out a cheer that draws eyes from across the courtyard. "We're in the same class again." He gives her a thumbs up and a wink, his energy so infectious it almost feels dangerous. The classroom door slides open with a rattle. Inside, the atmosphere is thick with first-day nerves and forced smiles. Koharu follows Izumi, watching him navigate the room with a natural ease she's always envied. She finds herself wondering how she ever ended up alone in the original timeline with someone like him by her side. Before Koharu can even find her seat, she's intercepted. A girl with reddish-pink hair and a smile that looks like it was painted on steps forward. It's Yuko Mochizuki. She introduces herself with practiced sweetness, her eyes already calculating Izumi's social value. She's the girl who will eventually betray Koharu, and here she is, offering friendship like a poisoned apple. Yuko is already working the room, her eyes flickering with irritation when Izumi focuses on Koharu instead of her. She tries to corner him for his number, masking her persistence with a laugh. Koharu watches the exchange, her 35-year-old instincts screaming. She knows exactly how this game ends, and she isn't about to let the next day's disaster happen again. Day 2. Koharu wakes up, half expecting to be back in the trash-filled bedroom. But the sun is still bright, and the mirror still shows a 15-year-old girl. Her thoughts are crystal clear, too real for a dream. Whether it's a coma or a miracle, she's still here, and the clock is ticking toward the moment her first life fell apart. Walking to school, Koharu notices things she's ignored for decades. The smell of the air, the sound of the train, the way the light hits the pavement. She hears the other students whispering about how cool Izumi is, and a sense of pride swells in her chest. She's alive. And finally, she feels like she can do whatever she wants. Izumi bursts into the classroom with his usual, "Good morning," but this time, the room stays silent. The students aren't looking at him with admiration, they're looking at their phones, then back at him with sneers of judgment. The atmosphere has turned radioactive in a single night. Izumi's smile falters, his hay hanging in the dead air. The source of the rot is on every screen in the room. A photo from middle school has been leaked, a picture of a much heavier Izumi. It's an act of pure malice, designed to strip him of his popularity before it even starts. Yuko is right there, her hands over her mouth in a performance of perfect, fake horror. How could someone do something so evil? Yuko leans in close to Izumi, her voice a soft, manipulative coo. "I'm on your side, I swear." She's marking her territory, positioning herself as the only one who doesn't care about his past. Koharu watches from the sidelines, the memories of her original timeline flooding back. She knows exactly who leaked that photo, and she knows exactly what happens if she stays silent. In her first life, Koharu did exactly what Yuko wanted. She ran away. She was too scared of the social fallout to stand by Izumi, and her silence was the final nail in their friendship. She abandoned him because she was ashamed of her own past, and that guilt has been eating her alive for 20 years. But Izumi even now is trying to laugh it off, though his eyes are full of cracks. The phones chime again. A second photo has been posted. This time it's Koharu, a picture from her middle school days as the crazy girl, dressed in goth Lolita gear and posing like a Chunibu nightmare. The classroom erupts in snickers. The trap has been sprung on both of them, and the walls are closing in just like they did before. There it is, in high definition for the entire class to mock Kanba Koharu looking like she crawled out of a dark anime trope. The caption reads like a death warrant, "I am better than my dark past." It's designed to humiliate her, to make her look delusional and dangerous. It's the moment the spotlight turns white hot. Izumi looks at his phone, then back at Koharu, and the heartbreak on his face is more than she can stand. He remembers the girl who was his only friend, the one who shared her snacks and her secrets. Seeing her being torn apart alongside him is the final straw. His hand trembles on his phone, the silence in the room becoming a physical weight. But Koharu isn't 35 anymore. She isn't the girl who runs. She walks right up to Izumi and takes the phone out of his hand, her face a mask of cold determination. The snickering stops as she turns to face the class. For 20 years, she's been rehearsing what she should have said. Today, she finally delivers the lines. She starts with a voice that cuts through the whispers like a knife. "It's true. This is Izumi and this is me, but we've changed. Who in this class hasn't?" She holds the phone up, her eyes locking onto Yuko's. Defamation is a serious crime. What would your parents think if they knew you were doing this to your classmates? The room goes deathly quiet as she dives into the deep end. She talks about the millions of yen and the decades of love their parents have poured into them. "I can't live without my parents' money. I live not just for myself, but for them. They gave me this life, and when you trample on someone's efforts, you're trampling on the people who love them too." Izumi tries to stop her, worried about the teachers, but Koharu is beyond caring about rules. She turns her gaze on the entire room, her voice dripping with an authority no 15-year-old should possess. "You'll have to live with the guilt of what you're doing, because what happened here is wrong and everyone knows it." She offers a handout, not as a threat, but as a lifeline. The person who did this, you still have time to change. Admitting you're wrong is what makes you a better person. She scans the faces of her classmates, many of whom are looking at their desks in shame. No one in this class is innocent. You all stayed silent while someone was being hurt. Koharu bows deep, her hair shielding her face as she finishes. "Please and thank you for your attention." She sits back down, her heart pounding so hard she can hear it in her ears. The silence stretches for an eternity, until a boy with glasses and a mole under his eye starts to clap. Slowly, then with conviction, the sound begins to spread. The applause builds into a roar, washing over the room. Even Yuko has to clap along to save face, though her expression is one of pure, venomous shock. Koharu looks around, her eyes wide as she realizes what just happened. She didn't just survive the moment, she conquered it. Whoa, wow. Izumi is practically beaming, looking at her with a new kind of wonder. "That was incredible. Coco, are you going to be a lawyer when you grow up?" He leans in, his face red with excitement as he asks if they can be good friends from now on. Koharu can only nod, her mind still reeling from the fact that she actually spoke her mind and didn't die. "Thank you," she says softly, and for once the words feel like they have a home. She stares down at her closed fist, the physical weight of her own agency finally sinking in. Even if this is just a dream, even if it's a coma hallucination, it's a better life than the one she left behind. Maybe she thinks, just maybe. In this world, maybe she can do everything she was too afraid to try. She can stand by her friends, she can face her enemies, and she can finally be the person she was meant to be. That dark future she spent 20 years in, she's going to rewrite every single page of it. The teacher arrives, blissfully unaware of the social revolution that just took place. She asks for nominations for class representative, her voice cheerful and mundane. The room is quiet for a second, then the boy with glasses raises his hand. "I think Koharu Kanba would be a great class representative." Koharu's head snaps around, her eyes nearly popping out of her head, but before she can protest, other hands start going up. "I think so too. She'd be great, right?" Even Yuko is forced to nod along, her teeth practically grinding together. Koharu is frozen in her seat, the world shifting in a direction she never thought possible. A forest of hands rises in front of her, not as weapons of judgment, but as a vote of confidence. After 35 long years, the spotlight doesn't feel like a curse. It feels like a beginning. She looks at Izumi's beaming face and the determined expressions of her new classmates. The realization hits her with the force of a tidal wave. For the first time in my life, I'm in class. Not hiding, not avoiding, but truly, physically there. The sky outside is endless, and for once, Koharu Kanba isn't afraid of the light. Her high school life hasn't just restarted, it's finally begun, and this time, she's holding the pen. Just as Koharu is about to ride the high of her first successful day, reality catches up in the form of Tanaka-sensei's frantic wave. The teacher is breathless, clutching a clipboard like a life raft while apologizing for a major oversight. She leans in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hum. I need another representative besides you. It's the first test of Koharu's new social standing, choosing a partner in crime. The train doors slide shut, sealing Koharu into a vacuum of her own making. She slumps into the seat, the weight of her 35-year-old baggage suddenly feeling much heavier than a school bag. Izumi is the obvious choice, but he's already drowning in club activities. The real problem isn't the workload. It's the crushing realization that outside of Izumi, her social landscape is a barren desert. The hair on the back of her neck prickles, a sudden chill that has nothing to do with the train's air conditioning. She whips her head around, eyes scanning the bored faces of commuters and the empty spaces between the handstraps. Nothing. Just the rhythmic clatter of the tracks and the nagging suspicion that someone or something is tracking an intruder who shouldn't be here. The front door clicks open, and the scent of home, soy sauce, warmth, and unconditional love hits her like a physical embrace. Haru is there, her apron dusted with the day's effort, offering the kind of normalcy Koharu wasted for decades. She takes her seat, the steam from the rice clouding her vision as she offers a quiet, shaky thanks for the meal. One bite and the floodgates threaten to open. It's not just food, it's a miracle on a ceramic plate. She looks at her mother and brother, realizing these teenagers in her class have no idea how lucky they are to have her. She bows her head, her voice thick with a gratitude she never knew how to express the first time around. Thank you for making delicious food every day. The sentimental bubble bursts with a single, devastating question from Haru. Did you leave the dark priestly cult? Koharu freezes, a piece of tempura halfway to her mouth. Apparently, the original 15-year-old Koharu used to pray in German before every meal. The secondary hand embarrassment hits like a truck, draining her HP to zero as she buries her face in her bedding, screaming into the mattress. Night settles over the room, the silence finally offering a moment to breathe until her phone buzzes against the sheets. It's a message from Izumi Minamizu, short and hesitant. Mind if I call? Her heart does a clumsy somersault. In her head, she's 35, but in this room with that blue light glowing on her face, she's just a girl waiting for a boy to ring. She looks out at the stars, wondering if high schoolers always feel this electric. Then the phone actually rings, and the opening notes of Beethoven's Ode to Joy blast through the quiet. She fumbles for the device, face burning as she remembers her past self's pretentious taste. Hello, she manages, her voice cracking under the weight of the symphony. Izumi sounds so bright, so effortless on the other end. Hey Coco, how are you? Meanwhile, Koharu is having a full-blown existential crisis. She's a 35-year-old woman on a late-night call with a 15-year-old boy. The logic of the universe is bending, and she's desperately trying not to sound like a suspicious adult accidentally catfishing a classmate. Izumi's voice is like a warm sunbeam through the receiver, blissfully unaware of her internal turmoil. It's so great to hear your voice, he cheers, while Koharu mentally prepares her defense for a crime she hasn't technically committed. She grips the phone tight, her knuckles white, feeling like the biggest fraud in the history of time travel. The laughter dies down, replaced by the heavy, static-filled silence of a secret being shared. Izumi's voice drops an octave. He tells her about the person who leaked those photos of his old self, the one who wanted to humiliate him. He got a message today. An apology. The first cracks in a wall of resentment he's been building for years. Izumi explains that his bully was moved by Koharu's words in class, the idea of not wanting to be someone who is ashamed of themselves. He's breathless as he delivers the punchline. I called to tell you your words reached them. He tries to end it there, a quick thanks, Coco, to mask the vulnerability. But he can't quite hang up yet. Koharu stares into the dark, her adult perspective cutting through the adolescent sentiment. Apologies are cheap, memories are long. She speaks with a gravity that makes the phone feel heavy. The ones they hurt we'll never forget, she says, her voice steady. She asks him the hard question, is it really okay for everyone to just forget the pain they caused you? The stars outside seem to align as Koharu makes a vow that transcends timelines. She doesn't just want to fix her life, she wants to be a pillar for his. Izumi, if you ever remember that pain, I want you to know I'll always be there for you. It's a promise born from 35 years of regret, delivered with the fierce clarity of someone who finally knows what matters. Izumi is stunned, the words hanging in the air between their rooms. He's never had anyone defend his past and his present with such conviction. He swallows hard, his heart hammering against his ribs as he begins to let the truth slip. Coco, I just wanted you to know, that's why I leave. Koharu's eyes go wide. The atmosphere is thick enough to choke on. Izumi is a disaster of red cheeks and sweaty palms, staring at nothing as he teeters on the edge of saying the one thing that will change everything. Migu, he stammers, the confession half-formed and terrifying. Smack! A sudden violent crash echoes through the line. Koharu jumps, shouting into the phone. Was that a hit? Are you okay? Izumi's panicked voice comes back, frantic and breathless. The bosses are home. The romantic tension evaporates in a cloud of adolescent panic. Sorry, see you tomorrow. The call goes dead, leaving Koharu staring at her screen in total confusion. Across town, Izumi is clutching his face, nursing a bruised ego and a very red cheek. Back in her room, Koharu is psyching herself up for day 2. No more cults, no more German prayers. Her new goal is simple. Say hello to whoever sits next to her. She punches the air, feeling 15 again in all the best and worst ways. The morning sun is bright, promising a radiant school life that Koharu is determined to earn. She's walking with Izumi, feeling like she's finally in sync with the world until he casually lobs a social grenade into the conversation. Coco, do you have a boyfriend? Koharu's lungs decide to stop working mid-breath. Impossible, Koharu scoffs, her adult cynicism flaring up. She's convinced no one would ever see her as a romantic partner. Izumi just sighs, looking at her with a mix of disbelief and pity. You're way too modest, he tells her. Does she really not realize the entire class voted for her? She's the girl of the hour, whether she likes it or not. They reach the shoe lockers, the usual morning chatter filling the hallway. Koharu is still arguing that people only see them as a pair of friends, but as she pulls her indoor shoes out, a piece of paper flutters from the metal slats. It hits the floor with an ominous quiet, a letter, handwritten, targeted. Koharu unfolds the paper, her breath hitching as the bold strokes of ink come into focus. For Koharu Kanba. I'll wait for you behind the gym at 4 p.m. It's the classic high school invitation or a summons. She looks up, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock, while Izumi hovers behind her with a look that says her impossible romantic life just became very real. A piece of paper hits the floor with an ominous quiet. Targeted. Handwritten. Koharu reads the ink strokes like they're a death warrant. I'll wait for you behind the gym at 4 p.m. Her 35 years of lived cynicism scream that this isn't a confession, it's a summons to a brawl. She's convinced her bold speech just put a target on her back, her face turning into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Who thinks of challenging me to a fight with a letter? Izumi sees the world through a much brighter lens, leaning in with a smile that says her impossible romantic life just became very real. He thinks she's finally getting the popular girl treatment, but Koharu is already spiraling into a scenario where this is all an elaborate bet by cruel classmates. She can practically hear the imaginary laughter of a crowd she's certain is waiting to humiliate her. The adult in her knows that ignoring a challenge only breeds more bullies. She has to go, even if she's convinced nobody could ever see her as a romantic partner. Izumi catches the shift in her eyes, his worry finally outweighing his teasing. If things get ugly, he wants to be her backup. I have to go. He strikes a pose like he's auditioning for a shonen lead, promising to sprint to her side the second he hears her yell. Shout my name and I'll be there. It's absurd, it's dry, and it's exactly the kind of support she didn't know she needed. Koharu can't help but feel a tiny bit of the pressure lift, even if the thought of a gym-side execution still looms. The final bell rings like a gong. While the rest of the class chats about karaoke, Koharu slips away, her jaw set and her posture rigid. She's not a shut-in anymore, she's a woman on a mission to settle her debts. It's time to act. Operation Wait and See is in full effect. She arrives early, creeping around the corner of the building to scope out the ambush. Her phone screen glows, 15:31. She's 29 minutes ahead of schedule, her heart drumming against her ribs as she looks for a place to hide. She's ready for anything except what's actually coming. The enemy is already there, crouched in the dirt. Koharu steps out, her shadow lengthening across the pavement. She isn't hiding her presence anymore. She's demanding a fair fight. If they want to throw hands, she'll give them the honesty they asked for. Face my infallible plan. The person standing there isn't a delinquent or a gang of bullies. It's Yuko Mochizuki, looking just as terrified as Koharu feels. The invincible cool girl is trembling, her eyes wide behind her bangs. How are you here already? A long, excruciating silence follows. The air between them is thick with confusion until Koharu finally breaks it, holding up the letter like a peace treaty. Yuko's nod is stiff, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, I wrote it. The facade is crumbling. Yuko isn't here to fight or manipulate, she's here because she's drowning in her own silence. She admits that her rude, cold behavior is just a clumsy mask for the words she can never quite find. I never end up saying what I really think. Yuko tries to flee, her embarrassment reaching a boiling point, but Koharu's voice stops her cold. It's the sound of someone who has spent 35 years feeling exactly that same suffocating weight. I'm also terrible at expressing how I feel. The air gets cold. Yuko finally drops the truth that's been festering. She's the one who leaked the graduation photos. The betrayal Izumi carried, the pain he shared, it started right here, with the girl currently clutching her own sleeves in shame. It was me, I did it. She looks at the ground, seeing only the damage she's caused. She hurt the one person who was kind to her, and now she's standing in the wreckage she brought upon herself. I was a complete idiot. A deep, trembling bow. It's an apology that feels like a farewell. Yuko blurts out her thanks and her sorrow all at once before turning to run, desperate to disappear before the rejection can land. I have to go now. Koharu doesn't let her go. Her hand shoots out, fingers locking onto Yuko's blazer. Yuko struggles, a trapped bird wanting to fly back into her cage of isolation, shouting for Koharu to let her go. But Koharu's grip is like iron. Hey! Instead of a lecture or a punch, Koharu pulls her into a hug. The world behind the gym falls dead silent. It's a messy, desperate embrace that says everything their words couldn't. For the first time, Yuko isn't alone in her disaster. Against Yuko's shoulder, Koharu whispers her own secret. She was terrified too. She wanted to run away and give up on everything, just like she did in her first life. I was so scared, I felt horrible. She pulls back just enough to look Yuko in the eye. She doesn't excuse the betrayal, but she honors the courage it took to confess it. Thank you for telling me everything. The tears are still wet on their cheeks, but the air is different now. Koharu sees Yuko's desire to change as a reflection of her inner feelings. She's not just forgiving her, she's inviting her into the fight. I'd like to make a request. If they're both clumsy at speaking, why not be clumsy together? Koharu asks Yuko to be the class vice representative. It's a terrifying proposal for two shut-ins, but the way they're holding on to each other makes it feel possible. I'd love for you to be the vice representative. They're both a mess, crying and smiling under the afternoon sky. The decision is made. Yuko Mochizuki is officially the new vice rep, and the school will just have to deal with these two allies. Let's improve together, Yuko-san. They walk back to class hand in hand, leaving Tanaka-sensei beaming at their newfound closeness. But at the edge of the hallway, Izumi is clutching his phone, his eyes nearly popping out of his head. He was ready for a rescue mission, not a best friend debut. I need to know what happened, Coco. The phone screen glows with the one thing Koharu never thought she'd see. Proof of a life. Her thumb hovers over the names, a tiny, digital miracle that means she's no longer an island. Her chest swells with a warmth that has nothing to do with the morning sun. My contact list is no longer empty. The classroom door slides open with a rattle. shattering the moment. Koharu jumps, her heart doing a frantic tap dance against her ribs as she looks up to see the girl she just saved from social oblivion. Ah. Yuko stands there, looking everywhere but at Koharu, her hands clenched at her sides. The air is thick with that familiar awkward static, but then she forces the words out through the silence. She wants to see Koharu this Saturday. Just them. Would you like to go out with me that day? Just the two of us. The yes is out of Koharu's mouth before she even thinks to play it cool. But as Yuko walks away, the word date starts echoing in Koharu's head like a siren. This isn't just a hangout, it's a mission. She clutches her textbook, her face flushing a deep, panicked red as the realization hits her. Yes, I'll prepare my clothes. Standing in front of the mirror, Koharu looks like she's auditioning for a low-budget gothic metal band. It's all chains, skulls, and way too many buckles. This was the cool look her past self curated, a walking, breathing monument to second-year syndrome that makes her want to dissolve into the floorboards. The horror is absolute. Every piece of fabric she owns is screaming for attention she definitely doesn't want to attract. It's all too edgy, too loud, and too much for a normal human outing. She stares at the pile of death party shirts and buckled pants with a growing sense of doom. Was my past self so delusional? It's not just the clothes, it's the world. Bowling, karaoke, arcades, to a former shut-in. These are alien planets with unknown customs. She checks the time, the glowing numbers of her phone mocking her lack of experience. Where will the date be? I don't know any of these places. The pressure is mounting until it feels like her head might actually explode. How do people talk? How do they act? If she goes like this, she'll be a laughingstock, a social disaster area. She grips her phone like a lifeline, her eyes wide with desperation as she scans the last message from Yuko. I'll wait for that day with anticipation. Across town, the world is much quieter. Izumi is just chilling with his sister, probably thinking about anything other than a fashion emergency. Then, the buzz. His phone vibrates on the bed, and when he sees the name on the screen, his entire posture changes. One look at his face, and his sister knows exactly who's calling. Koharu's voice is a shaky, high-pitched mess over the line. She's sitting amidst her pile of gothic laundry, her face burning. Izumi stands up, his brow furrowing as he hears the sheer panic in her tone. Something is wrong, and he's already moving before he even knows what the problem is. Are you sick? She spills it all. The outing, the complete lack of normal clothes, the absolute terror of interacting with store clerks. The cool girl from the entrance ceremony is gone, replaced by a girl who is terrified that the whole world is going to laugh at her. Could you please tell me how students go on dates normally? The silence on the other end of the line lasts a beat too long, and Koharu is ready to hang up in shame. Then, Izumi laughs, not at her, but with a warmth that makes the air in her room feel lighter. He doesn't just give advice, he offers a solution. If you're that worried, let's go out tomorrow to practice. The offer is so sudden it leaves her breathless. A practice date? With him? He's already listing places, karaoke, arcades, clothing stores, treating her social survival like it's the most natural thing in the world. He wants to help her find something she actually likes. How about we meet at 10:00 at the station? The call ends, leaving Koharu glowing in the dark of her room, her face finally losing that look of utter despair. She's got a plan, but for Izumi, the battle is just beginning. He closes his phone only to find his sister leaning against the doorframe, her eyes narrowed with a very specific kind of curiosity. Were you talking to a girl? Izumi doesn't even try to hide the grin on his face. He's genuinely excited to help his oldest friend, even if his sister thinks he's just being an easy mark. He tries to brush it off, asking for a fashion magazine, while his sister just sighs at his lack of leverage. You're a dirty fly who only knows how to make noise. Sleep is going to be a struggle tonight. As Izumi looks forward to their practice with a smile, Koharu is back to staring at her mountain of gothic gear. The death logo on her shirt serves as a bad omen. She's got the help, but the wardrobe? That's still a disaster in progress. Am I really going to have to go out with Izumi with what I have here? The morning sun is too bright for a girl wearing a literal mountain of black lace and death logos. Koharu spots him first, her heart doing a frantic tap dance deep in her chest as she mutters. Izumi-kun is already here, he turns, and for a second, the world just stops. He takes in the skull shirt and the over-the-top cargo pants, his brain clearly short-circuiting as he manages a strained, "Good morning, Koharu." Poor guy doesn't even know where to look. He sees the effort, the nerves, and the sheer absurdity of her outfit, finally landing on a thought that makes his own face heat up. "Koharu, you haven't changed a bit." Izumi is trying so hard to be a gentleman that it's actually painful. He blurts out that she looks phenomenal. But Koharu isn't buying the lie for a second. Those words aren't helping her ego. They're just highlighting how out of place she feels. As the train rattles toward the city, she stares at her reflection in the window, gripped by a sudden desperate resolve. She needs to shed this skin. Every single layer of it. "Today, I want to change all my clothes together." Koharu's gratitude is heavy, a sincere weight that catches Izumi off guard as she whispers her thanks in advance. He just offers that easy, crooked smile of his, reminding her that they don't have to follow some strict script. The goal is simple: have fun. They step into the store, greeted by the scent of new fabric and the intimidating brightness of a world Koharu hasn't visited in decades. "Welcome," the shop calls out, and the practice date officially begins. They're standing there like deer in headlights until a professional predator spots them. A shopkeeper with a gaze like a laser beam zeroes in on Koharu's gothic disaster. Koharu starts stammering about her budget, clutching her wallet like a shield, but the woman isn't having it. One look at the lace and the chains, and the clerk's inner stylist is insulted. She practically vibrates with intensity, shouting, "Leave everything to me, leave it to this old lady." It's not a suggestion, it's a kidnapping for the sake of fashion. What follows is a whirlwind of hangers and changing room curtains. Overalls, striped shirts, denim, and delicate coats. The shopkeeper is a blur of efficiency. Koharu is tossed from one look to the next, her head spinning as she sees a version of herself emerge that isn't shrouded in shadows. She's breathless, checking the time, and realizing the sun is already starting to dip. Wait, it's already evening. The curtain pulls back one last time, and Izumi stops breathing. There she is, no chains, no skulls, just Koharu in a soft white dress and a cozy cardigan. She looks radiant, blinking at him with a shy, uncertain hope. She starts to apologize for taking so long, but he cuts her off with a shout that echoes through the store. "Good heavens, you look even better now." With the bags in hand and the sun setting, the tension finally breaks into pure, unadulterated fun. They head to karaoke, the neon lights of the city blurring around them. Koharu belts out anime themes with a voice that's surprisingly clear, laughing when she misses a note. It's loud, it's silly, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, she isn't thinking about the past or the future. She's just here. Let's go to the arcade next. The arcade is a chaotic symphony of chiptunes and flashing lights. Izumi locks eyes with a stuffed bear in a crane game, his focus absolute. With a final lucky drop of the claw, the prize is theirs. He shoves the soft, round bear into her arms, blushing as hard as she is. "Here, it's for you." Koharu clutches it to her chest, her smile wide and genuine. In this moment, she finally understands why people go on dates. It's about this dizzying, golden feeling of being seen. The night air is cool, a sharp contrast to the heat still lingering in Koharu's cheeks. The buttons of the arcade machine still echo in her ears, a rhythmic reminder of the day's joy. She slows her pace, watching the street lamps flicker to life. Izumi suggests finding somewhere quieter next time, but she barely hears him. She's lost in the realization that she's happy, truly, dangerously happy. "Right now I feel like I'm in a dream I don't want to wake up from." She stops walking, her eyes fixed on the pavement as she pours out her heart. Everything, the clothes, the talking, the arcade, it was all perfect because of him. Then she drops the line that changes the temperature of the air, "I don't want to go home." She means she wants the moment to last forever, but Izumi's mind immediately goes to the darkest place possible. Izumi's anxiety spikes into the red zone. He's looking at her with a mix of terror and protective fury, his voice trembling as he asks, "Do you have problems at home?" Koharu blinks, her romantic sentiment crashing into a wall of confusion. She tries to backtrack, but the more she stammers, the more Izumi's imagination runs wild. Did he miss something? Has she been suffering in silence this whole time? Just as the misunderstanding reaches a boiling point, the sharp trill of a phone cuts through the air. It's a message from Yuko. The sudden intrusion of the real world and the upcoming date with her new friend jolts Koharu back to reality. "I'm being called," she chirps, the heavy atmosphere evaporating in an instant. Izumi is practically vibrating with leftover adrenaline and embarrassment. He tries to cover his tracks, shouting about how much he actually loves being at home and telling her to ignore everything he just said. He's a mess of red cheeks and flailing arms. Koharu doesn't notice the breakdown. She's already on the phone with Yuko, her face lighting up. "I totally forgot we had to plan our date." She waves goodbye, the bear tucked under one arm and her phone pressed to her ear, looking every bit the happy teenager she was supposed to be. Izumi watches her go, the sunset catching the edges of her new hair and the genuine joy in her eyes. His heart isn't just beating, it's practically trying to exit his chest. He's seeing her, really seeing her, and the weight of it is overwhelming. They move in opposite directions, two silhouettes under a deepening violet sky. Koharu is still animatedly talking into her phone while Izumi takes a few steps before the pressure inside him finally vents. He isn't just embarrassed anymore, he's completely hopelessly floored by her. He lets out a silent, internal scream that seems to shake the very foundations of the neighborhood. He clutches his head, his face a disaster of romantic overwhelm. "I like you way too much," he screams to the empty street, the words finally out, even if only the stars can hear them. Those surprise attacks of hers, the honesty, the smiles, the growth, they should be illegal. Meanwhile, Koharu is on the other end of the line, trying to play it cool with Yuko, unaware she just set off a volcano in her best friend's heart. Fresh hair, a dress that doesn't scream underground warlock, and a heart that's actually beating for the right reasons. Koharu stands in the middle of the city, feeling like a real person for once in decades. She owes it all to Izumi's patience, but today is about a different mission. She takes a deep breath, steeling herself for the real test. "It's because of you that I came up with this flawless plan." Yesterday was the rehearsal, a whirlwind of arcade games and karaoke that felt like the best day of her life. But now, the screen of her phone glows with a message from Yuko. This isn't just a movie outing, it's a promise. She grips the strap of her bag, her eyes narrowing with a determination to make sure Yuko has just as much fun as she did. Then, there she is. Yuko arrives looking effortlessly stylish in a denim jacket and boots, a far cry from the shaking girl in the hallway. Koharu freezes, her brain stalling at the sight of her first actual friend looking so cool. She fumbles over her words, her face heating up instantly. "Jigo, good morning?" "Yo, you look cute." She barely gets the compliment out before the panic takes over, dragging Yuko toward the theater to hide her embarrassment. The cinema forest is a wall of noise and people. It's a popular title, and the lobby is absolutely packed, making Koharu's social sensors spike into the red. They decide to divide and conquer to survive the crowd. Yuko takes the lead on seats while Koharu heads for the snacks, promising to secure a giant bucket of popcorn for them to share. It's a simple task, a normal teenager task, but the pressure is already mounting. She's just trying to order tea when the world pushes back. A sharp click of a tongue behind her, and then a voice slices through the noise like a blade. "Get out of the way, brat!" A stranger shoves past, leaving Koharu staggered and staring at the floor. The old familiar weight of self-loathing settles in her stomach. She's in everyone's way. She's a nuisance. In a room full of people, she's suddenly very, very alone. The plan is crumbling. The only available seats are right in the front row, forcing them to crane their necks just to see the screen. Yuko is silent, her expression unreadable in the dim light, and Koharu's mind starts to spiral. She's failing. She wanted to act as the perfect companion, the reliable friend, but instead they're stuck in the worst spot in the house. The silence between them feels heavy enough to suffocate. On screen, a man levels a pistol, but the real explosion happens in the row. Koharu reaches for a snack, her hand fumbles, and the world goes into slow motion. The bucket tips. A rain of salted kernels clatters against the floor, a deafening sound in the hushed theater. She freezes, her hand suspended in the air as her heart drops faster than the popcorn. The ultimate social sin, committed in the dark. Koharu is practically vibrating with shame, ready to vanish into the upholstery. She whispers a frantic apology, her eyes watering, but Yuko just looks at the mess with a bizarrely calm expression. She doesn't roll her eyes. She doesn't sigh. She just tells Koharu not to worry about it, that they shouldn't eat off the floor anyway. It's a kindness Koharu doesn't know how to process. A grace that feels completely unearned. The movie continues, but the images on the screen are just a blur. Koharu's mind has already fled back to the past, back to a time when a simple mistake wasn't just a mistake, It was an exile. The feeling of being weird or in the way is a scar that runs deep, and the darkness of the theater is making it ache. She remembers a trip, a group, and the moment the door was shut in her face. She had tried so hard she'd researched the best spots, prepared a guide, tried to embody the person everyone wanted. But teenagers can be incredibly cruel without even trying. They looked at her research, looked at her earnestness, and saw something they didn't want to be near. The transition from "join us" to "you're exhausting" happened in the blink of an eye, leaving her standing alone in the sun. The laughter behind her was the worst part. They walked away, leaving her in the dust of her own broken efforts. One of them didn't even look back, just delivered the final crushing blow. "You're weird, don't follow us." That was the day she learned to stop trying. That was the day she decided it was safer to stay inside and never give anyone the chance to turn their back on her again. A hand on her shoulder snaps her back to reality. The movie is over, the credits are rolling, and Yuko is calling her name. They step out of the theater only to find the sky has opened up. The gray rain is a perfect match for the gloom sitting in Koharu's chest. They stand under the awning, two silhouettes against a downpour that seems determined to wash away whatever was left of their perfect outing. Koharu looks at her feet, her voice small and brittle. She's ready for the rejection, for Yuko to say it was a waste of time. Today has been a very annoying day, and I didn't even understand the movie. She expects a goodbye. She expects this will signal the end of their little pact. She waits for the sound of Yuko walking away, but the rain is the only thing that moves. But Yuko isn't walking away. She's boiling over. She grabs her own head, her face twisting into an expression of pure, unadulterated rage, not at Koharu but at the world. "I hope he dies. That guy who snapped at you was so annoying." She's a hurricane of insults, wishing the stranger would step in dog poop or worse. Koharu stares, completely blindsided by the sheer violence of her friend's loyalty. Yuko continues to vent, her insults getting more creative as she pictures the rude stranger's demise. Then, as quickly as the storm started, it breaks. She clears her throat, her face flushing a deep red as she realizes she just spent 3 minutes swearing in public. Sorry, I think I went a bit overboard." Koharu can only blink, her heart suddenly feeling lighter than it has all day. The absurdity of it all finally hits. Koharu starts to giggle, which turns into a full-blown laugh, and Yuko can't help but join in. The failure of the date, the popcorn, the rude guy, it's all just background noise now. Yuko takes off her denim jacket, holding it over both of their heads like a makeshift roof. "Come on, get closer to me or you'll get wet." The invitation is simple, but for Koharu, it's everything. Under the shared jacket, the world feels small and safe. They stand shoulder to shoulder, the scent of denim and rain between them, and Koharu realizes she doesn't need a perfect plan to have a perfect time. She just needs this. Yuko's eyes sparkle with a new kind of energy, and suddenly the rainy city doesn't look so gray anymore. They have one more stop to make, and neither of them cares about getting a little splashed. They sprint through the rain, their boots splashing into puddles as they race toward the glowing neon of the arcade. Yuko is shouting about the sticker photo they still have to take, her voice full of a reckless, happy urgency. Koharu runs alongside her, her lungs burning and her hair a mess, and for the only time in 2 lifetimes, she's not worried about what she looks like. She's just a girl running through the rain with her friend. Inside the arcade, the air is thick with electronic music and the heat of the machines. They find the photo booth, and as they wait for the flash, Koharu finally says what's on her mind. She thought she had to play her cards perfectly to be liked. "I just realized I was wrong. The important thing is to be who I am and do what I want." Yuko listens, her cheeks flushed, as the machine captures a truth that no guide could ever teach. The next day at school, the memory is tucked into Koharu's notebook, a glossy strip of stickers, showing 2 girls with big eyes and even bigger smiles. Yuko is already planning their next trip, her embarrassment from yesterday replaced by a fierce new bond. Koharu looks at the photo, at the messy handwriting promising to go see a movie again, and she realizes the past is finally where it belongs. She's not the weird one anymore. She's just Koharu, and she's exactly where she's supposed to be. The sun hits the pavement with a promise that actually feels real today. Koharu stands before the mirror, hands steady as she ties her school ribbon, a simple loop that used to feel like a noose, but now feels like a uniform for a girl who's finally showed up to her own life. She catches her reflection, seeing a sparkle in her eyes that was buried under 2 decades of dust just weeks ago. She doesn't linger on the ghost of the shut-in she used to be. She just grabs her bag and heads for the door. She looks back at her mom, radiating a warmth that almost makes the years of isolation feel like a bad dream, and shouts, "I'm going to school, Mom." The school entrance is a minefield of teenage judgment, but Koharu is walking through it with her head held high. Izumi is already there, a beacon of spiky orange hair and genuine excitement, as he calls out a greeting. The background noise of the hallway is a low-frequency hum of gossip. Classmates wondering why the popular guy is hanging out with the otaku girl. But it doesn't land. The words just slide off her. Then there's Yuko, arriving with class records in hand, and a soft smile that confirms their new alliance. The morning air practically vibrates with the awkward energy of Izumi trying to navigate his growing crush. But Yuko isn't letting him have the floor. She swoops in, bypassing the polite greetings and wrapping Koharu in a sudden, fierce hug that smells like laundry detergent and stubborn loyalty. Koharu freezes for a second, her brain still catching up to the fact that someone actually wants to touch her, but the warmth is undeniable. Yuko squeezes tighter, her voice muffled against Koharu's shoulder as she declares, "No, don't ask the impossible. You're so slow I don't want to let you go." Laughter fills the hallway, a sound Koharu never thought she'd be part of, but reality intrudes in the form of a paper list. As they go over the class records, a name stands out, Seina Toragami. It's a ghost on the page, a student who exists in ink but never in the seats. Koharu stares at the kanji, the unfamiliarity of it prickling at her skin. She asks who it is, and the shift in the room is instantaneous. The light-hearted mood replaced by a quiet, questioning gravity. Yuko explains that Toragami hasn't shown up since the entrance ceremony back in May. He's just gone. To the other kids, he's a statistical anomaly or a delinquent in the making, but to Koharu, the word absent feels as heavy as a death sentence. She knows what happens in those empty rooms when the world keeps moving without you. Yuko sighs, noting that at this age, everyone has to start making their own choices, even if those choices mean disappearing. The conversation leaves a lingering chill, but Yuko manages to snap them out of it with a blush and a bit of flustered praise, calling Koharu cool for caring so much. They part ways at the gate, the sunset painting long, orange shadows over the pavement. Koharu watches her friend leave, her mind still circling back to the empty desk. The freedom to choose your own path is a gift, but she knows better than anyone that sometimes you don't choose the path. You just fall into a hole you can't climb out of. She tries to walk away, but the image of her own past self, huddled under a blanket in a dark room, eyes wide with a terror that no one else could see, stops her cold. The memory is a physical weight, a suffocating pressure in her chest. If Toragami is going through the same thing, he isn't just choosing to stay home, he's drowning. She can't ignore it. She can't let another version of her tragedy play out while she has the power to knock on a door. Her feet lead her away from the safety of the main road and toward a house that looks like it's barely holding itself together. The roof tiles are crooked, and the walls are stained with years of neglect. It's the kind of place that people cross the street to avoid. Koharu stands at the gate, her pulse thumping in her fingertips. It's quiet, the kind of heavy, airless silence that only exists in houses where someone is hiding from the sun. She clutches a small bag of school handouts like a shield. She tells herself it's just business, she's the class representative, and it's her job to return these. But the lie tastes like copper in her mouth. She's here because she's terrified of what's on the other side of that door, and even more terrified of what will happen if she leaves. She looks at the entryway, imagining the person inside, shivering in the dark. Just as she reaches for the doorbell, a voice breaks the silence. "Ah, guys." She spins around to find Kasai and the boy with glasses standing behind her, their expressions a mix of confusion and warning. Her hand freezes inches from the buzzer. She isn't the only one who knows about this house, but she might be the only one who doesn't know the reputation of the person living inside. They went to the same middle school as Toragami, and they don't have many good things to say. They describe him as a celebrity, but the word is dripping with sarcasm. In their world, that's code for a nightmare. They look at Koharu with genuine concern, as if they're watching someone walk into a lion's den without a whip. They summarize his history with a grim finality, leaving Koharu's optimism feeling thin and fragile. He was a pretty well-known vandal, they say, the word hanging in the air like a warning sign. They tell her he was deep in with a bad crowd, always surrounded by people you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. But even through the warnings they mention he was always studying. It's a contradiction that doesn't fit the image of a mindless thug. They advise her to just walk away and send a message instead. It's the safe choice, the smart choice. But Koharu doesn't do safe anymore. She's lived 35 years of safe, and it led to a grave she dug for herself. She reaches out and presses the buzzer. The chime echoes through the dilapidated house, a sharp electronic intrusion into the stillness. A message pings on her phone, probably a warning from her friends, but she doesn't check it. She just waits, her breath shallow, as she hears the heavy sound of a latch being thrown. The door creaks open, and the air that rushes out is cold and smells of stale energy. A figure looms in the doorway, not a scared boy hiding under a blanket, but a tall, imposing young man with a shock of messy blonde curls and eyes that look like they haven't slept in a week. He towers over her, his presence filling the entire frame, casting a long dark shadow that swallows Koharu whole. This isn't a victim. This is a threat. Koharu's lungs freeze. Every instinct she has is screaming at her to run, to turn back and pretend she never came here. He looks down at her, his features twisted into irritation and simmering violence. She tries to stammer out a greeting, an explanation, anything, but her voice is a thin, rattling thing in her throat. He doesn't give her the chance to find her footing. He leans in, his shadow heavy against the peeling paint of the wall, and delivers the blow. "Who the hell are you?" Before the bruises and the silence, there was a boy trying to find a different path. Seina Toragami wasn't always the shadow in the back of the room. He was someone reaching out, his voice small and desperate as he asked, "I'd rather you help me study, please." He tried to set boundaries with the kind of monsters who don't recognize them. He stood his ground, his eyes burning with a dignity he hadn't yet lost, telling them, "You don't have the damn right to touch my things." But dignity doesn't stop a boot to the ribs. Just as the world starts to blur into gray, a roar of authority pierces the chaos. A man steps out from the shop, not a hero, but a boss who treats his staff like family, and he's not about to let these bottom feeders lay another finger on his employee. The man doesn't just drive them off. He promises a special kind of hell, screaming, "I'll tie you up by the legs and make you eat ramen through your ass for a week." It's absurd, it's violent, and for Seina, it's the coolest thing he's ever seen. Why didn't he fight back? Because Seina Toragami is done with that life. He looks his mentor in the eye, the sheer gravity of his resolution making him look older than he is, and simply says, "I left those ways behind a long time ago." Fast forward to a school hallway, and those same resolve-filled eyes are framed by fresh bandages. He gives them the classic lie, the "I fell down the stairs" routine, but Koharu and Izumi aren't buying the story for a second. The concern in the room is suffocating. Even the younger kids can smell the danger hanging off him, but Seina just offers a steady hand on a head and a reassurance that rings hollow. He insists, "I was just sleepy and didn't step where I should have." Then, he drops the wall. He calls them by their names. For Koharu and Izumi, it's like a tectonic shift in their friendship, a moment of genuine connection that makes their hearts race, even if Seina pretends it's no big deal. But the peace is fragile. The teacher is late. The atmosphere feels thick, and Seina catches a glimpse of something outside that makes his blood run cold. Without a word, he's gone, a blur of a school jacket disappearing through the door just as the bell rings. Then, the announcement drops like a guillotine. School is on lockdown. Tanaka-sensei's voice cracks as she screams for everyone to sit down, but the students are already at the windows, watching the horizon fill with the black smoke and gleaming chrome of a motorcycle gang. Chaos erupts in the classroom, a chorus of terror as the engines roar closer. Yuko pushes through the crowd, her face pale as she grabs Izumi's sleeve, her voice trembling with the sudden realization. "I've been looking for Koharu-chan and Toragami-kun, but I can't find them." Outside, in the dust of the schoolyard, Seina stands alone. The delinquents circle him like vultures, their leader grinning through his teeth as he mocks him, shouting, "Heh, look, the idiot actually came." They're not here for a talk. They're here because they can't stand that Seina found a way out. They see his calm, his bandages, his attempt at a normal life, and it makes them sick. They want to tear down the man he's trying to become. Seina doesn't raise his fists. Instead, he drops to his knees. It's the ultimate humiliation. his forehead touching the dirt as he offers himself up as a sacrifice, pleading, "I only ask that you don't hurt anyone else." The plea falls on deaf ears. The leader revs his engine, the sound a mechanical sneer as he laughs. "Then we'll crush you until we're satisfied." Behind the glass of the school building, dozens of eyes watch in frozen horror, but one person is already moving. The doors burst open. Koharu Kanba isn't the girl who hides anymore. She's a hurricane of protective rage, her face twisted in a snarl that stops even the engines cold. She's seen enough people broken by silence. The air reeks of gasoline and intimidation. Koharu stands as a pillar of sheer stubbornness against the roar of the engines, ignoring the lead delinquent's snarl of, "Get out of the way, girl. If you don't move, I'll run you over." Seina stays pinned to the ground, his eyes wide as he watches this stranger gamble her life on his safety. The biker mocks the very idea of education, shouting for Seina to return to the streets where he belongs. Koharu doesn't just disagree, she screams her conviction into the dusty air, her face twisted in a snarl as she declares, Everyone has a reason to come back to school." She knows the darkness of those days when you can't even find the strength to get out of bed. She lived it for decades. But she remembers the moment the silence broke, the physical sensation of a hand reaching out to pull her back into the light. She sees her friends' faces and feels the heat of her own second chance. She won't let Seina rot in that same loneliness, barking out a warning that all that lost time will come back to haunt him when he least expects it. Her voice is raw now, echoing against the school walls. She's shouting about the lack of any valid excuse to stay away, her eyes locked on Seina with a desperate, burning intensity that makes him finally look up from the dirt. This is it. The moment she stops being a victim of her history and starts fighting for someone else's future. She throws her arms wide, her face a mask of fierce, tearful conviction as she screams, "That is my reason for being here. You all should try it too." Even the delinquent can only stare in baffled silence, his engine sputtering as the momentum of the threat completely dies. The tension is cut short by the screech of tires as a sleek black car tears onto the scene. The delinquent's murderous intent vanishes instantly, replaced by a cold, sharp dread. From the school windows, the other students watch in frozen silence as the hierarchy of power shifts in a heartbeat. A man in a suit steps out, his presence heavy and undeniable. He doesn't look at the bullies first, he bows to Koharu and Seina, his voice a low rumble. "I hope you can forgive me for what my son and his friend have done." The bikers go pale at the mere sight of him. The apology was just a courtesy, the reckoning is much louder. Sano-san grabs the lead delinquent, slamming his head into the ground with a roar that echoes across the campus. "Who told you that you could cause problems for normal people?" It's a total terrifying display of authority that leaves Koharu speechless. He doesn't stop until the thugs are sobbing apologies into the dirt, their faces ground into the gravel. Sano-san stands over them, a mountain of a man, promising a much more thorough thrashing once they wake up from their current state of shock. Seina bows low, offering a quiet "thank you very much" as the dust begins to settle. He explains to a bewildered Koharu that this man is the older brother of his employer, essentially the boss's muscle coming in to clean up a family mess. Before leaving, Sano-san drops a bombshell of a reward. He's tripling Seina's hourly wage and cutting his schedule down to just weekends. It's not just a raise, it's an exit strategy from the life Seina was drowning in. Sano-san walks back to his car without another word, ignoring Seina's confused stutters. Finally, the path ahead of Seina isn't paved with debt or violence, it's a chance to finally support his family without sacrificing his future. She watches him, her heart finally slowing down. The realization hits her like a warm wave. Seina-kun is actually going to be okay, he's finally going to have a normal life. They walk away, discussing the strange encounter. Apparently, Sano-san's brother is just a food vendor who made a massive mistake, hiring a miner for night shifts. In their world, money is just a means to help those who are actually putting in the work. Sano-san looks back one last time, his gaze lingering on Koharu before he tells Seina, "Make sure to take good care of her." But the peace is short-lived. The school teachers finally arrive, armed with catching poles and looks of sheer panic, signaling that the real trouble is only just beginning. Inside the guidance room, the air is thick with the sheer intensity of Tanaka-sensei's fury. She slams her hands down, her voice trembling as she reminds them of the boundary between youth and adulthood. "Us adults are the ones who deal with those problems, not you." You're just kids. Koharu slumped over her desk. She realizes that the anger isn't coming from a place of malice, but from a genuine, terrified kindness. Tanaka-sensei was just scared for them. The room goes quiet as Koharu turns to Seina, her voice soft but steady. She knows she's not the most reliable person, but she begs him to try and trust her anyway, promising with a bright smile, "I promise I'll do my best." Seina watches her, his expression unreadable, but the moment is interrupted by a sudden, violent shiver. The adrenaline that fueled Koharu's heroics has finally run dry, leaving her trembling and gasping as the pure terror of what she just did finally catches up to her. Then, the world goes still. A large, warm hand drops onto Koharu's shoulder, heavy, solid, and undeniably there. Seina doesn't say a word, but the steady pressure of his touch anchors her, stopping the tremors before they can pull her apart. The ticking of the classroom clock is the only sound in the silence. The warmth of his hand seeps through her uniform, a quiet, steady rhythm that fills the empty space between them. The spell breaks as Seina pulls his hand back, looking everywhere but at her. He mutters an apology, claiming it was just pure reflex. Apparently, it's exactly what he does to calm his younger siblings down whenever they have a meltdown. Koharu's brain short-circuits at the comparison. She shrieks it out before she can think, her face turning a bright, frantic red as she yells, just like a mom would do. The silence that follows is thick enough to choke on. She tries to wave away the awkwardness, apologizing for shouting the first thing that popped into her head. But at long last, Seina isn't looking at her with pity or suspicion. Then, it happens. The boy who's been a ghost in his own life finally lets the light in. He looks at her with a soft, genuine smile that crinkles the edges of his eyes, asking, "What? Did you feel bad for me?" It's the most human thing Koharu has seen in either of her lifetimes, and she can't even look away. She remembers the rule of his household: if the older brother is smiling, then everything is going to be okay. As they step outside and are immediately swarmed by their frantic, worried friends, Koharu finally lets out a breath she's been holding since she burst through those school doors.